Welcome to the School of Love, the place where miracles are normal. Hello and welcome to the School of Love, the place where we learn practical tools based on scientific research and our own experiences towards improving ourselves, living life to its fullest, and contributing to the best of our abilities to the world around us. I am Dr. Maria Grajdian and I am a professor of media studies and anthropology at Hiroshima University. In my free time, I am doing my best to guide you in building up a life of contentment, joy, and fulfillment while applying lessons learned in school to overcome the difficulties, challenges, and insecurities of the real world. This video focuses on the construction of femininity as a means to counterpoint Takarazuka Revue's overwhelming and overwhelmingly compelling display of masculine idealization by means of its otokoyaku, or female impersonators of male roles, such as the performance The Wind Over Yamatai-Koku from 2017, staged by Flower Troupe. While taking into account the multiple layers in Takarazuka Revue's administration and self-orchestration, such as performance politics, the economic supervision of brand-related consumption, the social cultural management of actresses and fandom, including fans and fan communities, as well as the performances themselves, this video brings into foreground Takarazuka Revue's strategies to reinvent Japan's mythical origins within an expanding globalized market by mid-2010s, and while employing historical feminine instances in the lead roles. Especially the last 30 years, since the opening of the new Grand Theatre in Takarazuka in 1993, marked an unexpected tendency in Takarazuka Revue's public appearance, both visible in the increasing lavishness of its performances and in the intensified commercialization of the increasingly androgynous otokaku figures, that is, as mentioned previously, female impersonators of male roles in Takarazuka Revue. The transition from ethics to aesthetics and from imagination to ideology in Takarazuka Revue's marketing of historical geographic spaces reflects and condenses its metamorphose from an insignificant social cultural medium to a powerful political economic message in post-war Japan, as well as Japan's emerging awareness from being an outsider to the Western world to gradually becoming an insider of the Asian community. Founded in 1913 by Kobayashi Ichizo, one of the most significant entrepreneurs in pre-war Japan, the all-female popular musical theatre Takarazuka Revue proved itself, along its more than centennial existence, both a faithful mirror of and an influential model for the Japanese society. Simultaneously conservative in its gender representation and progressive in its performance practice, a contradictory symbol of the Japanese modernity and Japan's leading figure in entertainment industry, emerged from the syncretic cross-gender tradition of the centuries-old classical Japanese stage arts, and challenging that very tradition through the creative employment of Western music and dramatic plots, Takarazuka Revue reconstructs in a specific way asymmetric interactions between identity and alterity, model and copy, history and geography, obtrusively displayed in sparkling tunes, fairy tale-like sceneries, and gorgeous costumes. And now, first things first, that is, two important disclaimers. The first disclaimer serves to strongly emphasize the fact that this YouTube channel, The School of Love, is not part of my educational and research activities at Hiroshima University. It is nonetheless part of my privilege, joy, and sense of duty to propagate and implement knowledge, information, as well as motivation and inspiration outside the limited framework of academic endeavors. Together, we can build up a better tomorrow for as many of us as possible. The second disclaimer relates to the fact that I am a trained musicologist and musician, not a psychologist, therapist, or counselor. The ideas I'm sharing in my videos reflect my deep-going preoccupation with life, my own life and other people's lives, and express the results of my experience, research, and for better or for worse, my failures, and my recovery from those failures, recovery which is still ongoing and continuously ongoing. The ideas expressed in the videos on this channel, named The School of Love, cannot and may not and must not replace the consultation with specialists in whichever areas of your life you might have questions or you might struggle with. If you are new to the channel, at this moment I would like to ask you to please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, commenting. Thank you very, very much. This helps us not only with that mysterious algorithm, which seems to dominate the galaxy of YouTube, but also with contributing to the expansion of the community of humans doing their best to impact positively the world and those around them by discovering their authentic selves and living life wholeheartedly. Thanks again. In his seminal work from 1997, The Post-Emotional Society, Stjepan Mestrovic writes about the diffuseness of feelings in a media-driven world and the fake texture of such fundamental emotions as compassion and loyalty, which is a result of the overwhelming tension between the necessity to be constantly up-to-date and the limited capacity of the average citizen to absorb and cope with the incessant amount of information flooding the late modern consciousness. Drawing on Mestrovic's findings, this video aims at looking into the complex stress ratio between love and capitalism in late modern Japan, taking into account the two dimensions of love as a phenomenological endeavor, directly experienced by individual social actors in their quotidian activities, and as a semiotic phenomenon, deeply related to the mechanisms and processes meant to construct, propagate, and implement it on the one hand, and those subjects on the receiving end of these mechanisms and processes, largely known as consumers on the other hand. In the sole known Western nation to have attained Western standards of life within decades from the technocratically driven dawn of its modernization started in 1968, feminism and female empowerment were never really an issue in Japan in the first place, in accordance with its Shinto mythology celebrating the goddess of sun, Amaterasu Omikami, at the very core of its divine hierarchy. But precisely because desire, rather than lust, friendship, or the urge to procreate, is what connects romantic emotions with capitalist expectations and drives the average consumer into the deluge of limitless illusions of forever delayed gratification, generally labeled as love, late modern Japan experiences a surge in the market of virtual love. Backed by data collected in the field, Japan over the past 20 years, ethnologically contextualized and hermeneutically analyzed, this video explores the deep entanglements between capitalism as the economic, political driving force in Japan's late modernity or entire modernity, and the Japanese version of what Michael Kimmel calls aggrieved entitlement in his likewise seminal work Angry White Man, American Masculinity at the End of an Era from 2015. The focus is on the increasing efficiency of virtual love to satisfy the need for emotional fulfillment while carefully protecting its participants from competition or rejection, and thus leading them into the risk-free space of the post-feminist desire. There are two accepted definitions of virtual love, both being based on the fundamental opposition to real love happening in here and now between two physically present and hopefully emotionally, mentally involved partners. Firstly, virtual love refers in an informal parlance to an emotional exchange occurring indirectly, namely via media-related devices and mostly in the cyberspaces. Recent technical innovation resulting in such phenomena as online dating and dating simulation applications, social networking sites, online video gaming and cyber networking has led to an increase of indirectly mediated interhuman interactions happening virtually. Secondly, virtual love means that form of love which occurs beyond the realms of immediate perception, that is, on the level of individual fantasy and construction. Among others, the appearance of fandom as the unlimited and one-sidedly perceived admiration, appreciation, and adulation going out from the fan towards the object of his or her desire is particularly peculiar. While it does take place in the real world and involves considerable amounts of emotional, mental, physical, and so on energy, money, and time, it is unidirectional in terms of authentic involvement as a response to the creation of empathic communication between artists and their audiences. Or in the words of the Japanese sociologist Yamada Masahiro, men may love idols such as AKB48 and porn actresses. Women may love Takarazuka Revue's actresses, journeys, idols, television stars, and musicians. In addition, people may fall in love with virtual characters in animation, films, and movies. When I interviewed a woman who was an idol star fan, single and in her 40s, I was told, "I'm so happy just thinking about him." Falling in love with a real person without reciprocation can be called pseudo-love. This is also common in Japan. For example, men can go to cabaret clubs where they drink alcohol and chat with young women, and maid cafes, where young women are dressed like maids and play games with visitors. They ask to have conversation with their favorite women. Working with high school age girls is a business in some places. Men can be romantically stimulated in such industries. Of course, the same relationship holds true when we speak of women going to host clubs. This is different from an actual romantic relationship. It is a one-sided relationship where a worker is paid to satisfy romantic emotions. Still, visitors can temporarily feel as though they are really in love. As a practical example of the normalization of virtual love or pseudo-love through fandom and its active promotion by means of mass media-related reinforcement, the phenomenon of Takarazuka Revue is explained in great detail. Takarazuka Revue is a Japanese popular all-female musical theater company located northwest of Osaka since 1913, extremely popular in Japan and almost unknown outside of Japan. Backed by extensive fieldwork and meticulous archive research, the current video analyzes the inner dialectics of the theatrical medium Takarazuka Revue as an instrument of reflecting, promoting, propagating, implementing, and thus providing alternative role models and existential paradigms within the neoliberal undercurrents crisscrossing Japan's public discourse in 1917 and thereafter. Particular focus lies on its relationship and interaction with fans and fan communities, as well as their reflection in the virtual love as a performance and marketing strategy. On the one hand, there is the tension between the androgynously charismatic and fascinating otakoyaku figures, which are female impersonators of male roles in Takarazuka Revue, and the apparently conformist and submissive musumeyaku, which are female impersonators of female roles in Takarazuka Revue. On the other hand, transcending the otakoyaku's and musumeyaku's own stage embedding within performances, they are extrinsically regarded as social actors in the public sphere subject to limits, regulations, and circumstances generated both by the quotidian Japanese society and by the imaginations and expectations of Takarazuka Revue's specific environment, particularly fans and administrators' prescriptions. The mass media landscape of recent years has been suffering a recurrent backlash, which hardly allows for creativity and freedom of expression in a world more concerned with public image than with artistic excellence. More than any media, the theatrical medium seems to move swiftly along the interdictions and restrictions imposed by political correctness and to detect that aesthetic ideological space which allows for messages to penetrate the walls of superficiality. For the past decades, I was inadvertently pursuing a form of so-called applied anthropology as promoted among many others by Anne Allison and Christine Kondo, and more recently Simon Sinek. Applied anthropology is a combination between everyday lifestyle and research in which the investigator, in this case me, serves as the main subject of his or her own research endeavor while keenly observing its counterpart, in this case Japanese audiences and their relation with the social environment. The main difference to the classical participatory observation is the fact that in participatory observation, the observed phenomena occurred usually in groups of humans belonging to a different cultural circle or geographical sphere than the researcher, and took place without a prior theoretical formulation of the expected results and impact on further areas. In case of applied anthropology, the point of departure serves as a clear orientation entity and incorporates considerable amounts of prior preparation, both theoretical and methodological, so that the result, while not entirely predictable, is to a certain extent estimated in terms of its relevance for larger segments of human life and activity. Methodologically, participatory observation as fundamental part of the applied anthropology and hermeneutical interpretation are the two pillars of the analysis, which validate the phenomenological experience and give strength to the resulting statements. Parallel to this phenomenological approach, I have been pursuing what might be described as an empirical study, which refers to informal discussions with fans and more informal consumers of Takarazuka Revue productions about what interests and moves them, as well as a close observation of their reactions to my questions and explanations. As it turned out, witnessing Takarazuka Revue's performances with their exquisite stage design and its plain retelling of history, employing straightforwardly constructed characters with whom fans can easily identify, held much greater potential to make comprehensible the intrinsically complicated dynamics of the Japanese geopolitics of generating financial gains via its entertainment media under half-hearted governmental surveillance, usually known under the more generous label of cultural imperialism, while promoting soft power as a new means to climb the ladder of international recognition, rather than explaining elaborate theories of cultural analysis. I became genuinely curious as to why this was happening. Parallel with this fieldwork, consisting of applied anthropology involving participatory observation characterized by phenomenological experience and the empirical collection of data, I have intensively researched recent work in anthropology and post-colonial studies, cultural studies and media studies, which led me into the less charted territory of anthropology of media and how humans interact with media on a daily basis. Simultaneously, it has been pushing notions of identity, plurality, of options and individual freedom at the center of my research endeavor. On a deeper level, the research meant starting to think on how people give in unconditionally to the overwhelming temptations and delusions of instant gratification created by mainstream media, or in less common cases, on how they resist the almighty media and its infiltration on all domains of life. To this goal, I proceed in 3 steps. The first step consists of describing Takarazuka Revue, Japan's extremely popular all-female musical theater founded in 1914 and located in the city of Takarazuka, northwest of Osaka, in western Japan or Kansai area. The second step entails a detailed description of the Wind Over Yamatai-Koku, or in Japanese,邪馬台国の風, which was a major performance of the year 2017, focusing on the importance of the female main character in underlying the strength and charisma of the main male character, and in mesmerizing the 10,000s of theater goers. With a plot equally spanning mythical, mythological, and folkloric areas, and referring to a legendary Japan of more than 1,800 years ago, the Wind Over Yamatai-Koku reminds of a time in which femininity and female authority transcended masculinity, wars, and violence. The performance was staged by the Flower Troupe, or Hanagumi in Japanese, famous for its glamour and for the performing skills as well as fabulous top-star otokoyaku actresses, featuring top-star otokoyaku Asami Ryo and top-star musumeyaku Senna Ayase, as part of the typical golden combination of each of the 5 ensembles which constitute the Takarazuka Revue company. In the final step, in the conclusion, I observed the performance, The Wind Over Yamatai-Koku, on the background of the sociologically nuanced concept of virtual love as a meaningful alternative to the real love in the Japanese world, where the preservation of family as the fundamental cell of the society has absolute priority. However, as recent studies repeatedly demonstrate, such as ideological endeavor blatantly backfires in historical perspective, as real love, with all its immediate implications such as unconditional affection, compassion, and empathic presence, ultimately prevails. Within Japan's highly cooperative and unpredictably volatile entertainment industry, Takarazuka Revue has established itself throughout the decades as an important reference system, with equally stable ideological and aesthetic standards, and serving simultaneously as a dynamic example of the power of hard work, insight, and persistence, compounded by kindness and a sense of responsibility hardly ever taken into account when it comes to culture products as a means to implement and transmit a specific set of values across generations. Founded in 1914 by Kobayashi Ichizo, Takarazuka Revue has started as a small theatrical arrangement set up to attract more customers in the relatively isolated city of Takarazuka, with its hot springs, or onsen in Japanese, and its fresh air provided by the surrounding forests on the majestic mountains. Kobayashi Ichizo, Japanese industrialist and politician, was one of the most influential, prominent, and progressive entrepreneurs and businessmen in pre-war Japan. He is best known as the founder of the Hankyu Railways Company in 1907, with its main terminal at Umeda Station in Osaka, and for his successful development of the railway infrastructure in an adverse region in the northern part of Kansai, or Western Japan, through the implementation of residential areas along the railway line, an amusement park, a department store at the railway terminal, as well as, in time, the main attraction, the Takarazuka Grand Theater in Takarazuka. Within few years, Takarazuka Shokatai, or Takarazuka Choir, turned into Takarazuka Shoujo Kageki Yoseikai, or Takarazuka Company for the Training of Girls Revue, and became increasingly popular, so that even a known 2-year training institution, Takarazuka Music School, or Takarazuka Ongaku Gakko in Japanese, was founded in 1919. In 1940, it changed its denomination into the current Takarazuka Revue Company. With 2 massive theaters with over 3,000 seats in the major metropolitan areas of eastern and western Japan, Takarazuka close to Osaka, respectively Tokyo, built in 1924 and 1934, and 5 ensembles spanning 10 performances weekly during the whole year, encompassing a huge variety of topics and manners of tackling those topics, Takarazuka Revue Company has come to be recognized both as a mirror of Japan's tumultuous 20th century and an important source of inspiration, as it reputedly facilitates, or essentially mediates, the import of non-Japanese, mostly Western, culture assets to Japan and to its Japanese audiences. The unusually strong dialectics of the relationship between Takarazuka Revue administrators and its mostly fan-based audiences has led in recent times to more profound analytical approaches of a business model relying on deep fandom. That is, those faithful fans who support a specific phenomenon throughout the years, instead of dissipating their money, time, and emotions on a variety of entertainment tools, which might be labeled as surface fandom. There are, of course, clear disadvantages to this business orientation, but its most obvious advantage is the profile clarity of the cultural institution beneath deep fandom, which emerges as a strong identification model and existential paradigm, while challenging prevalent standards of fan service in Japan. At the center of the social culture phenomenon embodied by Takarazuka Revue stays otokoyaku, or female impersonator of male roles, a highly ambivalent construction combining Western physical allures with Japanese inner qualities and exemplifying once again the powerfully famous or infamous hybrid identity painstakingly epitomized in the slogan Wakon Yosai, the basis and crux of Japanese modernity. In tandem with otokoyaku's representation of masculinity on Takarazuka Revue stage and public advertisement, musumeyaku, which means literally daughter role with the subliminal image of maiden, refers to female impersonators of female roles in Takarazuka Revue. Both otokoyaku and musumeyaku are subsumed to the category of actress, while their denomination within the Takarazuka Revue Company and its related context is seito, which means pupil, or Takarazuka, or in Japanese Takarazuka, introduced by the director Shirai Tetsuzo. Shirai Tetsuzo compared the cute Takarazuka Revue actresses with the beautiful Parisian at Moulin Rouge. Within the extremely strict hierarchy of Takarazuka Revue's educational and performance system, the concept golden combination refers to the otokoyaku-musumeyaku pair, in Takarazuka Revue jargon top stars, at the top of every of the 5 actively performing ensembles. It is important to mention that while the acting staff is exclusively female, the administrative staff is to a great extent male, and was exclusively male from Takarazuka Revue's inception until 1999. This clear-cut separation of functions has been playing a fundamental role in Takarazuka Revue's evolution and its preoccupation with staging evolving patterns of social cultural delineation and belonging, as well as its dialectically pragmatic adaptation to the expectations of audiences, while subtly influencing their tastes, preferences, life choices. As to be shown later on in centering upon otokoyaku's construction of masculinity and her dramaturgic versatility of reformulating both historical figures and regular citizens, Takarazuka Revue displays Japan's global ramifications long before the awareness of international impact had entered the Japanese mind with the simultaneous dissolution of past referential systems. Nevertheless, it is a strong musumeyaku's presence as a symbol of feminine transcendence, which underscores otokoyaku's overpowering ideal of masculinity. It has become a common tropos in academic papers on Takarazuka Revue to powerfully highlight the emotional relationship between fans and actresses, as well as the social financial entanglement between fans' involvement and the administration's exposure. What I believe to be an equally irresistible trigger within this extremely ambivalent interaction is the tension between the stage construction, including the storylines of the performances, and the public narrative on the function of the mass theater as a carrier of faith and significance. In the subsequent analysis, I shall show the intricate ways in which fantasy worlds and theatrical dramaturgy intertwine in order to create an illusionary space of virtual love turned real. The performance titled The Wind Over Yamatai-Koku, or Yamatai-Koku no Kaze in Japanese, is labeled an ancient romance and was directed by Nakamura Satoru. Coupled with the Revue Fantastique Santé, Only the Finest Wine for You. In the second act, it was staged at Takarazuka Grand Theatre in June and July 2017 and at Tokyo Takarazuka Theatre in July and August 2017. The story of The Wind Over Yamatai-Koku takes place 1,800 years ago in ancient Japan, where it was called Wa, and was composed of 30 small states, of which each had a king. The rice cultivation method and high-performance metal tools, which had been imported from China, had significantly changed people's lifestyles. On the other hand, the endless disputes among states over fertile territories had exhausted the population. Meanwhile, the conflict is really heating up daily between the two states. Yamatai-Koku, which is the centerpiece of the Wa Federation, and Kunakoku, which is trying to gain dominance over Wa in an aggressive manner. Here enters Takehiko, a boy of Yamatai-Koku, who had become an orphan during the fights with Kunakoku and had been chased by pursuers. He was rescued by Li Yuan from China. Since then, he had been learning the art of combat from Li Yuan for years in order to survive. One day, Li Yuan is killed by a soldier of Kunakoku, just like Takehiko's parents had been killed. What Li Yuan had been teaching Takehiko is deeply engraved in his mind. While the destiny is unchangeable, you can change the way by which you reach that destination. Later on, Takehiko saves a girl named Mana when she is assailed by a soldier of Kunakoku. Mana is on her way to the village of Yamatai to become a shrine maiden. The girl, who can hear the voice of the gods and foresee the future, gives Takehiko these words: "You will cross the sea and go to a far-off distant land someday in the future. And we had encountered once before in the far past and had promised to each other then to meet again." Takehiko is feeling attracted by the mysterious aura and appearance of Mana, who wants to use her powers to bring a peaceful life back to the people. The destiny seems to have brought these two young people together, but after Mana leaves for the village of Yamatai, Takehiko makes up his mind to fight for Yamatai-Koku for peace in the state and among the states. Upon arrival in the village of Yamatai, Takehiko is ordered to go off to Kunakoku with other soldiers for a reconnaissance mission. At the corner of the fortress, he encounters an enemy soldier and they fight. This enemy soldier is Kokochihiko, the general of Kunakoku, who had killed Li Yuan and later attacked Mana. Looking to Kokochihiko, who escapes in the chaos of fire at the fortress, Takehiko has a foreboding that he will meet the general in combat again. Suddenly, the king of Yamatai-Koku, the core of Wa Federation, dies. As the result of a meeting by the kings of member states, Mana is appointed as the general shrine maiden, as well as the queen of Yamatai-Koku, with the new name Himiko. At the ceremony of accession to the throne, Takehiko is stunned by what he sees. The new queen is Mana, whom he had saved from a Kunakoku soldier. Takehiko is thinking of her, who is now beyond his reach. The presence of Takehiko at the same place takes Mana by surprise too. They both, who have been sharing a strong bond since a distant past, seem to get an opportunity to see each other again through a certain incident, which involves the temporary loss of the visionary powers of the shamaness queen and thus her dismissal as the head of the Yamatai-Koku, followed by her regaining the ability to foresee the future and resulting in her returning to the throne and reigning for the next decades in peace and cooperation with neighboring states. Takehiko plays an important role in bringing Mana as Queen Himiko back to throne, but in doing so, he loses any chance of uniting his destiny to hers. He will, however, cross the sea to China and serve as special emissary from the Federation of Hua to the Chinese kingdom of Kaowei. These historical events are mentioned in the 3rd century Chinese records of Wei, which has a special part, account of the Hua people. The records of Wei also mentions envoys traveling between the Hua and Wei courts. Himiko's emissaries first visited the court of Wei Emperor Kaorui in 238, and he replied in such words. Herein we address Himiko, queen of Hua, whom we now officially call a friend of Wei. Your envoys have arrived here with your tribute, consisting of 4 male slaves and 6 female slaves, together with 2 pieces of cloth with designs, each 20 feet in length. You live very far away across the sea, yet you have sent an embassy with tribute. Your loyalty and filial piety we appreciate exceedingly. We confer upon you, therefore, the title Queen of Hua, friendly to Wei, together with the decoration of the gold seal with purple ribbon. The latter, properly encased, is to be sent to you through the governor. Expect you, O Queen, to rule your people in peace and to endeavor to be devoted and obedient. However, it is important to note that while identifying Himiko, or Pimiko of Hua, is straightforward within the history of China, it appears as highly problematic within the history of Japan. The records of Wei provides details about shaman queen Himiko and her communications with emperors Kao Rui and Kao Feng, but the 8th century Japanese Kojiki, which translates as Records of Asian Matters, and Nihon Shoki, which translates as Chronicles of Japan, which quotes the Chronicles of Wei, disregard Himiko, unless she was the subtext behind the accounts of Empress Jingu, Yamato Hime no Mikoto, or Yamato Totohi Monosohime no Mikoto. None of these 3 legendary Japanese royal shamans adequately corresponds with the Chinese chronology and description of Himiko. Assuming the records of Wei accounts that Himiko died around 248, if one accepts the dubious Japanese traditional dating, then she was closer to the 3rd century Empress Jingu than to the 1st century Yamato Hime no Mikoto and Yamato Totohimomose Hime. On the other hand, if one accepts the post-dating adjustments prior to the 4th century, then Himiko was closer to these Yamato-named shamans. While the records of Wei describe her as an important ruler of the 3rd century Japan, early Japanese historians purposely avoided naming Himiko, even when the Nihon Shoki quoted the records of Wei about envoys from Hua. Furthermore, researchers have struggled to reconcile Himiko-Pimiko among Chinese, Korean, and Japanese historical sources. However, records of Wei depicts her in such words. The country formerly had a man as a ruler. For some 70 or 80 years after that, there were disturbances and warfare. Thereupon, the people agreed upon a woman for their ruler. Her name was Himiko. She occupied herself with magic and sorcery, bewitching the people. Though mature in age, she remained unmarried. She had a younger brother who assisted her in ruling the country. After she became the ruler, there were few who saw her. She had 1,000 women as attendants, but only one man. He served her food and drink and acted as a medium of communication. She resided in a palace surrounded by towers and stockades, with armed guards in a state of constant vigilance. The Wind Over Yamatai-Koku brings into the spotlight the half-mythical figure of shamaness queen Himiko and the historical role she might have played in appeasing and unifying the warring states of ancient Japan. While the main male character, Takehiko, still occupies the greatest part of the central stage, due to Takarazuka Revue's dramaturgic ideology placing the top star Otokoyaku at the core of any performance, in the general logic of the storyline, Himiko as mana dominates the audience's awareness. It is a soft, though profound reminder of the power of the feminine instance in times of turmoil and confusion, and the value of individual responsibility transcending the collective embedding. Mana, the village girl, turns into an all-encompassing symbol, staying unmarried, to support her role of service in listening to the voice of gods and transmitting it to the ordinary people. But in doing so, she builds the bridge between middle-aged professional housewives, as an overwhelming majority of Takarazuka Revue fans still belongs to this category, and their roles as Japanese citizens, caught up in mostly sexless marriages according to official statistics, lacking any emotional connection they might once have shared with their husbands. In this sad quotidian reality, strongly identifying with powerful females who have impacted the history of their country, even unbeknownst to official sources in the anonymity of times long past, contributes in a fundamental way to finding one's own place in the spiritual community, even if it is one fueled by consumerist delusions and forever postponed fulfillment and reciprocity. The central concept of the current analysis is virtual love, as the core of what might be called a post-emotional society in which individuals heavily, if not exclusively, rely on external factors to find emotional fulfillment and validation. Based on the definition of virtual love as either a technologically mediated interaction between humans without the physical presence or the safe, distant one-sided adulation-admiration encountered in the fandom phenomenon, the typology of virtual love promoted by Takarazuka Revue through its carefully crafted structure of fan communities and fans' activities, as well as involvement, has been critically dissected. The performance taken as practical example of how this precisely happens, the Wind Over Yamatai-Koku, brings into foreground two fundamental types of post-feminist emotionality in which the feminine instance clearly dominates the discourse, but it is placed in the shadow of male strength and protection, respectively, in which the feminine entity inspires and motivates the masculine symbolic character to enhance his reality and to harness his innate abilities. In both cases, the post-feminist dimension refers to a type of interrelationality between female and male entities, in which the power hierarchies are turning flexible, united towards a common goal. Likewise, emotionality addresses the issue of communication and cooperation on the basis of mutually acknowledged feelings and reasons, which, once again, transcends the traditional gender debate with its feminist repercussions. More importantly, the on-stage representation of reality cautiously reflects a specific ideal to be reproduced off-stage, which, however, eludes its historical implementation for reasons detailed in this last part. The social construct of feminine reproduction in present-day Japan is still anchored on two major paradigms: the Ryosei Kenbo, which translates as good wife, wise mother, ideal established by major technocrats, and a diluted version of feminism emerged in post-war Japan with vague reminiscence of Amaterasu's mythological power, and which is based on the idea that motherhood lays at the foundation of women's strength. Indeed, motherhood was seen by Western proto-feminists as the catalyst of empowerment and liberation. However, being a nurturing and warm-hearted wife came ahead of being a smart mother due to the fact that, biologically speaking, maternal instincts are built in every woman, while the skills necessary for being a good wife are culturally to be instilled and reinforced through education. That being said, in the course of my interviews, particularly related to the previously mentioned concerns, femininity, marriage, motherhood, among Takarazuka Revue fans, I have dealt mainly with two categories of women. The first category of women was composed of the married ones, who regarded their husband's income as their birthright, and correspondingly, more often than not, treated their husbands very poorly, while stating that their sole priority is the children, their education, and their well-being. All of them were stay-at-home housewives, or so-called seingyo-shufu in Japanese, and the major complaint about their husbands was their inability to earn more money, although the husband's income has increased constantly since the time they were dating or freshly wed. So the second category contained the unmarried ones, who again could be divided into three major groups. The younger ones, from their early 20s until their mid-30s, who have never been married. The older ones, from their mid-30s to their late 40s, of which a vast majority have never been married. And those in their 50s and 60s, who either have never been married or who were recently divorced, roughly half and half. While expectations from intergender relations inadvertently differ depending on age, education, social status, their attitude towards what a man should be was astonishingly similar, based on a sense of entitlement to protection due to their potential function as mothers and primary educators. This sense of entitlement was coldly augmented by a specific sense of disillusionment as to what intergender activities in real life actually were supposed to mean or how they were supposed to take place. A confusion resulting from a lack of valid role models in the previous generation or generations. Clearly, their mothers and grandmothers had not been happy or happily married or in the mainstream media. Obviously, the unrealistic television dramas and live-action movies cannot be taken seriously. Lastly, an unmistakably distinct sense of bitterness completed their general attitude, as well as their declared fascination for a world in which such disenchanting errors or failures could not occur because men were not allowed into in the first place, such as Takarazuka Revue. This stays in strict contradiction with recent statements of Yamada Masahiro, one of Japan's leading sociologists. Marriage stems from romantic relationships. Simultaneously, it brings with it new economic life. In Western societies, romance is emphasized. Both men and women are expected to be economically independent, and they attempt to live a life of cohabitation, adopting its lifestyle. The norm that romantic relationships equal self-fulfillment remains strong. However, in Japan and other East Asian countries, there is the unwritten norm that marriage must be part of economic life. Economic commitments are required to be made in order to get married. Therefore, satisfying romantic emotions outside real love and marriage is accepted. Much more profoundly, Takarazuka Revue fans' attitude of dismissal and disenchantment reminded me strongly of Michael Kimmel's concept of aggrieved entitlement while referring to angry white men in the United States and their aggressive assertiveness in desperately trying to keep the status quo, particularly in terms of socio-economic and political distribution of power and dominance. What seemed, however, to aggravate the Japanese state of affairs is my experience from pursuing research in the field of men and masculinity studies. An intimidating sense of discontent and despair, as well as of not being seen for the authentic person that one is, and of not mattering beyond one's function as an ATM or money purchaser, seems to plague an important part of the male population in Japan. This is compounded by the overwhelming social obligation to belong to a family, which is regarded as the fundamental self for reproduction and education of children, with clearly set up roles for every member of the family by the political discourse, the educational establishment, and the mainstream media. Even more pervasive is the borderline separation between emotional, sexual, and biological needs. In the post-Enlightenment Western individual, a strong sense of the unified self emerges and offers stability, authenticity, and autonomy to the social actor. While Takarazuka Revue might appear at times as a typical hybrid product of Japan's hasty modernization for more than 150 years, it has equally become, during the past decades, at least since mid-1970s, with its definitive separation of gender roles, into the ideal risk-free space of the post-feminist desire, generously employing with increasing efficiency virtual love as the main means to saturate the need for emotional fulfillment while carefully protecting its real-life participants from competition or rejection. Simultaneously, the Japanese society has already become post-emotional in its ability to turn away from individual emotions towards media-constructed and discursively reinforced emotions. Japan Inc., as a nation, has entered the realm of post-feminist utopia with its egalitarian distribution of emotions, or lack of hereof, while bypassing the ideals of post-feminist emotionality, a truly revolutionary concept promoted by Takarazuka Revue administrators, which remains, for better or for worse, a purely ideological principle. What this indicates in terms of personal development and human significance, it is for now an open question. So, that would be from me for today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to me. And as always, I'm looking forward to welcoming you here very soon again. Love and peace to you all.